And we're at Pozo Mercado here today with John Halbach, who is the National Sales Director of Hacienda de Chihuahua Sotol. And the key word there is Sotol, because I didn't know until a week ago that Mexico, as well as having tequila and mezcal, has a third spirit. It's called Sotol.
Yes.
And I hardly ever see it. John, maybe you could tell us what is Sotol, and are we going to see more of it in the future?
You will see more Sotol now. As the world gets more mixology crazy, you'll start to see a world created for this. But Sotol is a spirit that's been around for quite some time. It's been the little brother, the moonshine of Mexico. And some of it's of its own doing, but some of it's just because it's been put down and belittled and not be seen. But Hacienda de Chihuahua has done so much to make this a brand, make this a force, and you will see a lot more Sotol, especially as the price of agave, which is what you use to make tequila, goes skyrocketing, more and more Sotol.
So where does Sotol come from in Mexico?
Well, Sotol, in Mexico they have a number of states, and the closest to the United States, you have Chihuahua, and you have Coahuila, and you have Durango, and those are three states in Mexico that are all contiguous. And at that one little point, at the edge of the Chihuahuan Desert, just to give you a feel, the Chihuahuan Desert is about 6 times as broad as the Grand Canyon. And on the slopes, they have a plant growing Sotol. And right in there is a particular clone called the Daisy Lirion Wheelery, which is a clone of Sotol, which is ideal for making this beverage.
So this is not made from agave, unlike tequila and mezcal.
And not only is it not an agave, it's a distant cousin of agave. In the past, in the 80s and well before, it was classified as an agave. Now we're more comfortable calling it a wild agave. It's actually closer to a lily. It's closer to a flower than it is to agave. And one example is you can plant agave with runners, but with the Sotol plant, it has to be germinated. And you have to get the flower out and the birds and the bees.
So I plant my Sotol plant. When does it start yielding bottles of Sotol?
Well, it's another major difference is with tequila, they'll tell you agave is anywhere from 5 to 8 to maybe 10 years. Sotol, it takes 14 to 15 years to fully grow to reach where it needs to be to yield this. And it takes one bottle, one plant to make a bottle.
One plant makes one bottle, and you take down the plant, so you have to plant another one to get another bottle.
Yes.
And what do they do? Once they've harvested the plant, what happens to it to make Sotol?
Well, let me give you just a brief history of Sotol, if I may. Sotol has long been consumed as a beer, just like tequila was. In fact, to make a great liquor, you make a beer.
Yeah.
And so the Indians had always been making a beer out of the Sotol, but they would have to roast it a lot like a mezcal. A lot of people find mezcal off-putting because it's fire roasted mesquite and the plants they have. And Sotol was traditionally roasted as well. But because of the nature of the plant, you had to roast it about 3 times longer than you would an agave. And so it was an incredibly smoky beverage. So this beverage had been made in that style. So it had been grown as a beer, and then the conquistadors coming through, the queen forbade the making of any spirits out of grapes anymore. So all they had to consume on the ships was what they brought with them. So them knowing the great brandy techniques as the Spanish did,
right,
they began to make a great spirit out of Sotol. And that's really where Sotol started, and it's been a spirit of Chihuahua for a long time. In fact, Pancho Villa was known for drinking Sotol, and even crazier, it was the #1 selling spirit in the United States for a brief period when Prohibition started.
So if I were to drink a Sotol, does it come in the Plata, the Reposado, and the Anejo that I find with tequila?
It does. In fact, there are a couple of tiers of my brand. They have a Plata, Reposado, and Añejo. I am working right now with a higher-end brand with the triple distilled platinum, the Oro Puro, and the H5, and they're all super añejos for you. And so they're fantastic. We actually have a crema coming out soon. So they have all those tiers. and they're out there. But let me distinguish here: Hacienda de Chihuahua, unlike other Sotols, we do not smoke our plant. We actually, with the blessing of the, I'll just say it, the Herradura family, took us in the 90s and took our master distiller, Pepe as we call him, and took him in and basically said, you'll yield a better plant steaming. And it took years to really develop to where Sotol could go.
And what would be the taste of Sotol and the nose of Sotol, and can contrast that with tequila if you could?
Okay, well, I like to say when I'm selling tequila and when I'm talking to people about it, is that you don't need tequila face to drink Sotol. Tequila has a pepper on the back of the palate.
Yeah.
And that some people find off-putting. I'm a tequila drinker. I love tequila. So a lot of that kick is fun, but with Sotol you'll find the smoothness almost shocking.
So it's smoother?
It is absolutely smoother. It shows an opulence to the fruit. It shows a brightness, almost a hint of white peach to it in the nose with a little bit of an herbal characteristic or a botanical. In fact, I have found mixologists actually address the botanicals in this when making cocktails.
What differences are there between your brand and other brands now?
Well, let me tell you just the brief history of this. In that the family that owns this product, the Elias family in Mexico, they were looking to make a cognac-style brandy in Mexico City in the 70s. And that was their dream. And they found a Mexican national working at Martel. Actually worked at Larson and worked at Moët Chandon making a dosage.
So he is working in cognac, which is the best-known brandy region in the world.
And absolutely. And they bring him in to make a cognac-style spirit. And tragedy befell the family. The youngest son was playing a soccer tournament in Texas, and the family flew in to see him, and the plane crashed, and he lost his whole family.
Wow.
In fact, he was raised by his grandmother and his uncle were the only two left. And when he became of age in the 90s, the uncle brought him in and said, it's time to bring back your grandfather's dream. And they found Pepe, the original, the gentleman that had worked at Martel, and they brought him in and said, we want to make this, but not with grapes. We are so proud of our state and our city, Chihuahua. We want to make it with Sotol. And Pepe went through years of searching and was lovely, was wonderfully partnered, Herradura, all the tequila producers. It was kind of like Napa in the 70s. They all said, hey, come on in, let's help you do this.
Right.
And instead of smoking, they went to steaming, and it took years in making, and about 3 years later, he finally came out with how Sotol could taste and what could happen. And being from cognac, he had French oak, the Limousin oak. He had and it was all toasted, not charred, and had that all brought in, so he immediately started aging it. In fact, they have some Sotol down in Chihuahua that is 18 years old in Limousin oak. And they say it's only going better. We have products right now that are, I'm selling one called the H5 that is 7.5 years. And I would run it against any cognac, any XO cognac, I would proudly put it to it. And yet it's still got that, still the essence of Sotol. It didn't lose what it is. But Pepe is this methodic genius. He uses champagne yeast versus beer yeast. He column distills, which is very different. It's all pot stills down there.
Yeah.
So things are different, and you would think if this were tequila, you might lose some of the characteristics of the plant. But this is not tequila. This is Sotol. This is not agave. It's Sotol.
It's really sounds to me like it's a brand, like a French brandy of cognac, aged the same way in Limousin oak, French oak. But it's made from Sotol instead of from grapes.
That is really the essence. Is when you talk to them, they're adamant to say we say liquor here casually. They say spirit, and they're adamant about this is a spirit. This is of the eau de vie type.
Right.
And this is what we're aging in French oak, and the passion they have for this is extraordinary.
Right. And where would somebody be able to find this in a bar in Dallas, for example?
Well, I mentioned the word mixologist, and mixologist is the key. The people that took a shine to this first were the mixologists in town who got the nose of it. And they're the ones who actually told me, breaking this down, that this has a characteristic of the beauty of tequila is that it fights with what it goes against, and it's the contrast. With Sotol, it tends to enhance what it's in. It tends to build and blow up. The first mixologist I gave it to told me that you could stop with fresh pineapple and just poured on top of fresh pineapple. He goes, and I don't need to tell you anything else. And I thought that was funny. I'm like, I need a little more.
Right.
And then we went to, it was grapefruit season, and ruby red grapefruit is extraordinary, and how it handles those cocktails is something you really need to taste to see the difference.
Great. And so basically any bar with a good mixologist is going to have some Sotol. And then what about at retail? Is it available retail yet?
Retail it is. And let me just say, in defense of the retailers that bring it in, there are 700 tequilas out there in this world. And there are probably maybe half of that actually produce. And there's a bunch of labels out there. So when a new product hits the market, you've got to appreciate the hesitance just to throw everything on the shelf.
Sure.
And so they asked me to make sure I develop it in the bars. But now Siegel's has it on the shelves, PK's, all the big retailers now have brought it in, have okayed it, and you'll see it appear on the shelves soon.
Great.
If not already.
Great. And just to our viewers, one reason I'm talking with John today is that I see Sotol as being at an inflection point. It's going to go from being totally oblivious or totally anonymous to being one of the hot drink varieties. It's going to be seen as something different and probably preferable by a lot of people to tequila. So look for it in a mixologist's bar or in good spirit stores. John, thank you very much.